Hello there, and welcome to the bunker. You join me for a special live stream. We are going to be debating the question: does Bible prophecy prove God's existence? In a very short while, I will be handing over to Renato, who will be our moderator for the evening. I just wanted to give a little bit of explanation at the beginning to explain how all this has come about. Winston recently contacted me about some information that he'd come across that he found particularly compelling. He wanted me to watch some videos. I said, well, I'd rather not watch the videos, but if you want to have a conversation or if you want to bring something to my attention, why don't we do a debate? And Winston very graciously agreed. Winston is not, as I understand it, an ex-Jehovah's Witness, but he is well known for his Watchtower Examination channel, which focuses almost exclusively on Jehovah's Witnesses. So he will be debating the theist perspective. I will be debating the atheist perspective. I think, and my aim here, rather than point scoring or persuading anyone necessarily, although persuading is always helpful in a debate, but my overriding concern is that we navigate our conversation today with as much respect and with as much cordiality as possible. And I know Winston is minded the same. So I very much look forward to seeing what happens. From this point forward, Renato, this show is in your hands. With great power comes great responsibility.
Wow, that's very exciting. Thank you, Lloyd, first of all, for inviting me. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. It's always fun to see two smart people exchange ideas. So I'm glad to be here. My job is simply to make sure we don't go over time and to make sure we keep a respectful dialogue. We don't interrupt each other for the benefit of the viewers, especially. We're going to have 4 segments in this debate. The first segment will be opening comments, 7 minutes each. The second segment will be a 5-minute counter for each. The third segment will be closing thoughts or a summary, 5 minutes each again. And we're going to finish taking comments and answers from our viewers. So let's make sure we have a good one. Are you both ready, gentlemen?
I think I am.
Okay. So Winston, you're up first. You have 7 minutes for your opening comments, sir.
Okay, I want to say thanks to Lloyd for the opportunity to appear on his show, and thanks to the Lord for the opportunity to be used to share with viewers the evidence that he does exist. I feel a little bit like Elijah on Mount Carmel because he also had to debate Baal's prophets. And he did something that made me smile. He poked fun a bit at his worthy opponents. And I just want to, poke a little fun at Lloyd. Make the thing as relaxing as possible. Imagine yourself, Lloyd, going into your bathroom one morning, not shaven, not looking as good as you do now, beard down, your hair is long and uncombed. And you look in the mirror and you say to yourself, I think I evolved from a monkey. But then you turn around and you see your wife, that beautiful person that the day you saw her, you decided, I want this woman to be my wife. Beautiful. And you look at your beautiful daughters and say to yourself, they must have been created. I believe that God, by the very act of creation, has proven himself. I have a camera that I love to use to zoom in on the moon. And for me, it is just absolutely fascinating to see that thing standing in midair and to see that technology has created this device that I can use to zoom in and see the surface of the moon. That camera could never just appear. It could not have just evolved. It had to be manufactured. When I look at the universe, I know that there is a creator. But God, in his wisdom, knew that creation would not have been enough evidence for some skeptics. And so he provided an even greater line of evidence, prophecy. I stand here or sit here rather, in a unique position because I am not a theologian. I am not a historian. I did very poorly with history in school. That's why I chose business and the arts. So I'm a horrible history student. So I sit in a unique position because I am really, like you, jurors. I have sat and I've listened to the theologians, I've listened to the historians, and the evidence that they presented. My verdict is that the evidence is strong enough that there is a God, and that evidence is found in Bible prophecy. One of the things that Lloyd and I have in common is that we do not just go on whims, we go on evidence. We go on what is factual and on what is believable. Most Christians will tell you that their belief in God is a matter of faith. They have never seen him, but they accept on faith that he is real. It's a little different with me. I go with the evidence that he is real. And God, in his wisdom, knew that the skeptics, as I said, would not accept creation alone as evidence for his existence. And so he provided something stronger. You may not believe in the existence of God, but I believe you agree with historians about the existence of the greatest king of Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar. The Bible and history concur the very existence and the time that Nebuchadnezzar reigned. So Nebuchadnezzar is real. God, again, in his divine wisdom, so arranged that Nebuchadnezzar would be the only heathen to write a part of the scripture. Daniel chapter 4 was written by Nebuchadnezzar. God, in his wisdom, knew that some people, even with the strong evidence that prophecy provides, would say that Daniel was just an imaginary character. He never existed. And so Nebuchadnezzar verified the existence of the prophet Daniel by telling the story how God revealed to him, Nebuchadnezzar, that God, is real. And how did God make the point to Nebuchadnezzar? By demonstrating to Nebuchadnezzar that he rules in the affairs of men. He had a vision. Jehovah's Witnesses will be familiar with this chapter of Daniel, if none other, because this is the chapter that the Watchtower has used to deceive Jehovah's Witnesses with the foolishness about 1914. They totally twist the prophecy, saying that it had a larger fulfillment, but the prophecy tells us that everything was fulfilled on Nebuchadnezzar. So Jehovah's Witnesses know the prophecy quite well. He had a vision where the Lord demonstrated to him that God, witnesses call him Jehovah, Jehovah rules in the affairs of men, that he sets up and he determines who will be king. That Nebuchadnezzar had a dream. And just as in Daniel chapter 4, where he related that he had a vision, that he called in the diviners, he called in the magicians, he called the astrologers, he called the Chaldeans. The Chaldeans were the intellectuals. So we call intelligentsia could not reveal the vision. Magicians could not reveal the vision. Astrology could not explain the vision. But Daniel told him there is a God who reveals. And Nebuchadnezzar, after having had the revelation, himself said, there is a God. He had another vision. Daniel chapter 2. He saw this image, and Daniel gave him the interpretation. With only 7 minutes, I cannot give all the details, so I will be doing another video, because Lloyd made me realize something yesterday in our conversation, that it would be better to present the information yourself than to point to a video with someone else doing it. So I will be uploading a video where I give greater details. I cannot get into all the specifics, but we know the story. The head of gold that Daniel told Nebuchadnezzar was, you are the head. How could Daniel know that Babylon would have been defeated by an inferior army? Some could speculate that he could do this because there was a prophecy, because the Bible, God prophesied the existence of King Cyrus before he was born, and prophesied that Cyrus would have defeated Babylon, and stated exactly how in prophecy. Babylon was thought to be impregnable, but Cyrus invaded by drying up the river that ran under its walls. And so
Thank you,
another
Winston.
prophecy. The time is up. Oh, there we go.
Yes, time's up. Sorry, Winston.
All right.
Lloyd, you're up. 7 minutes for your opening comments, please.
Well, thank you for your very gracious opening remarks, Winston. I'm at a bit of a loss, to be honest, because the theme of our debate is, does Bible prophecy prove God's existence? You've been given 7 minutes to give your slam dunk evidence that Bible prophecy proves God's existence. And you've gone to quite some lengths to explain why this is useful, because heathens can't be persuaded by creation, and so they need something else. They need Bible prophecy. You made a few comments there about evolution that aren't entirely accurate. I don't believe that I evolved from a monkey. I believe that monkeys and humans have a common ancestor, and that monkeys and humans have more DNA or share more DNA than humans and rats, or humans and oak trees, or humans and bees. So I don't believe that personally, and when I hear theists say that, I immediately think that's just not how evolution works, or that's not how I characterize evolution.
Okay.
But you've nevertheless had quite some time to spell out your kind of slam dunk case, and obviously all of this arose because you wanted me to watch 90 minutes of video, and I kind of hoped that we would have a summary whereby I could understand exactly what it was that you found so compelling. I obviously am quite familiar with Daniel chapter 2 and the immense image. Again, I just haven't heard anything, and believe me, I want to orient my understanding of reality around what's true. It's not like there's a compelling reason in and of itself why I have to be an atheist. It's just that I haven't come across any evidence, and when I do come across evidence, I'll happily go where the evidence takes me. It's just that what you've just said doesn't give me any evidence. You have in Daniel chapter 2 a vision. Well, first of all, you point out that only Daniel could interpret the vision. Well, the book was kind of written slightly biased towards the character of Daniel, and indeed the plight of the Jewish exiles in Babylon. And it's also not so much of a surprise to me that the world power that gets to replace Babylon is an inferior power. If I were in Nebuchadnezzar's court and I was predicting a power that would replace Nebuchadnezzar, mindful of how powerful the king is and his ability to make me miserable if I don't say things that please him, I too might say, but of course, a power that replaces you, O king, is going to be lesser than yours,
Okay.
just to placate him. So I don't see anything too amazing about that. That seems to me the sort of thing that you would say. And I too am not a historian. I too am no scholar. I would wonder to what extent it can be said that the Medo-Persian Empire was lesser. And as far as I understand it, the different metals are supposed to drive this point home. We start off with gold, we go to silver, we then go to, I think, copper, or is it bronze? And then we go to iron. I don't know. I suppose my biggest problem with the statue of the immense image is that it's a very, if you're God and you're wanting to make a prediction of the line of world powers to enforce your authority, or to impress upon people the fact that you are clairvoyant, that you can see the future before it happens, and you are going to come up with a system whereby people can predict in advance a line of world powers, so that people are just waiting around for the next one. Oh, it's time for the next one now, and we know exactly what it's going to be like, and what it's going to be called, and what its characteristics will be. You're going to need something a bit more impressive than, well, there's a head of gold, there's some shoulders of silver, there's a breastplate of copper or whatever, and there's some legs of iron. That doesn't tell us anything about those powers, or what those powers will do, or the manner in which those powers will take over from the previous powers. There is astonishingly little detail, and that's exactly what you would expect of a prophecy that isn't really a prophecy, but it's just a story that sounds a bit like a prophecy. What you would need for a compelling prophecy would have far more layers to it than simply gold, silver, copper, and iron. Look at how many empires there have been through history. I would ask you, Winston, to go on Wikipedia. There's actually a really interesting page on Wikipedia. List of largest empires. Look at the largest empires there have ever been. I'm ashamed to say the top one is the British Empire. Beneath that you have the Mongol Empire, the Russian Empire, the Qing Dynasty, the Spanish Empire. I didn't even know that was a thing. Renato, did you know there was an Empire of Brazil at one point? And you have to go quite some way down the list before you even get to the Roman Empire. So hopefully you understand where I'm coming from. Maybe there's a more compelling prophecy that you can point to. It's just that if I were in your position, I was trying to make your argument, I would not be using Daniel chapter 2, because it doesn't even give us any real solid information predicting the line of human rulerships.
Okay, thank you, Lloyd. Winston, you have 5 minutes for a count.
They say time flies when you're having fun. Because Lloyd is right. But I was just warming up when I heard the time is up. I never got a chance to summarize as much as I wanted to. But I listened to Lloyd, and I agree. Because what I presented so far would not have been enough evidence to convince me that God is real. It is when we look at the interpretation of the prophecy that we now begin. The prophet Daniel in chapter 2 pointed to the kingdoms that would dominate the world up to our present time. And it happened just as Daniel said. The question is, what would have enabled Daniel 2,500 years before it happened that Europe today would be united and can never unite? There is something that I wonder if Jehovah's Witnesses know. There is a controversy over what the feet of iron and clay is. The Watchtower teaches that this is some Anglo-American, I don't even know what they're talking about. But if the iron represents Rome, and we all agree the iron represents Rome, doesn't it make sense that the feet of iron and clay also involve Rome? So the last part of the prophecy, Daniel predicted that Rome would not have been conquered. You had Medo-Persia conquered by Greece. You had Greece conquered by Rome. Rome was not conquered, but just as Daniel predicted, thousands of years before, Rome was divided into 10 kingdoms. And every attempt to unite Europe has failed so far because Daniel said it would not happen. God said it would not happen. What explains that but God being real? Who can predict the future so accurately? Daniel, do you understand that Daniel is practically predicted Brexit? I know it sounds funny to you. You will never find Brexit in Daniel. But what he's talking about is that Europe would never be united. Everyone who's tried to unite Western Europe has not done it. And I would give a challenge. This is a major challenge that I would give to every atheist out there. Lloyd, there's a gentleman I see on MSNBC, I'm forgetting his name, who says he's an atheist, trying to raise funds to see to it the separation of church and state. I would invite him and invite you and everybody to get all the atheists in the world, put all the resources in the world and try to rebuild Babylon. And I tell you, it cannot happen because God said it cannot happen. I challenge you, rebuild Babylon. Who else could so determine that Babylon could not be rebuilt if not a divine being? Who could so accurately predict the future than God? As I said, this is not enough time to really give all the details. So I will be doing a video to upload at the channel to give you all the intricate details that point to this reality that there's God. Unless you can tell me how would anyone be so accurate, could so accurately predict the rise and falls of Earth's empires down to our very day? And if you think that Daniel is wrong, see if you can unite Europe or rebuild Babylon. God says it cannot happen. It cannot. Defy him if you can. That's it.
You have more time if you want, Winston. You have 30 seconds.
30 seconds. Well, I yield my time to Lloyd.
Okay, thank you.
Because we have another 5 minutes to come.
Lloyd, you have 5 minutes, but just before you go, Lloyd, just for the benefit of the viewers, make sure to put yourself in the center screen if you want to.
Sorry, did I not do that last time?
No. Yeah, you've got the control.
It's because I'm so bashful and unassuming, as everyone knows.
Lloyd, so 5 minutes.
Okay. Well, I was really looking forward to the bit that we missed from Winston's opening remarks, namely the evidence that Daniel chapter 2 proves God's existence. Incidentally, there's a problem that Winston I don't think has thought about, which is that Winston's arguing that Daniel predicts the future. It's possible that Daniel could predict the future and it have nothing to do with God, of course. There could be time travel involved. Winston can't prove that there wasn't time travel involved. Winston can't prove that it wasn't Marty McFly that went forward in time and saw the unfolding of history. He can't prove any of that. But I think Marty McFly would have done a better job of explaining the unfolding of history than Daniel chapter 2. Again, I'm sorry, Winston. I invite everyone, I invite all of my viewers to look up Daniel chapter 2. I think the relevant parts are Daniel chapter 2, 31 through to about 44, 45. I'm just not seeing it, Winston. I'm just not seeing it. The Roman Empire is still with us. I'm a fan of history. I'm not a historian. I'm a fan of history. I've been to Rome. I've been in the Pantheon. I've visited the Colosseum. I assure you, the Roman Empire is no more. I've been to recently to the arena in Pula, Diocletian's palace in Split. You can see the remains of it, but it's not in power. So the U.S. president and the U.S. Senate and the House of Representatives, they don't answer to Rome. The Houses of Parliament and the Houses of Commons and the monarch in the UK, they don't answer to Rome. Rome doesn't exist anymore. And again, if you were going to craft a description of the unfolding of human history, this wouldn't cut it. What about the Ottoman Empire, which incidentally ruled over Israel for centuries? No mention of that in Daniel's vision. I think it's incredibly oversimplifying to suggest that you had Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome. Oh, what more do we need to discuss? Rome was the last word on empires. Again, go to the Wikipedia article. List of largest empires. It breaks them all down for you. You'll be scrolling and scrolling and scrolling, looking at all the empires, nearly all of them larger and more influential, ruling over more people and with a higher landmass than Rome. It's an incredibly Western-centric view to take that only the Roman Empire mattered because the Roman Empire happened to influence European history and subsequently the history of the Americas, because the Americas were colonized by Europeans. What about Asia? What about Africa? What about all of these places? Obviously, the Romans were in North Africa, but what about these large swathes of our planet that were never under the control of the Romans? Didn't even know that the Romans were there. What about the Incas? What about the Aztecs? It's just an incredibly naive view to take that the Romans were the last word on empires. I don't share that view. And in my remaining minute, allow me to point out that even if you can argue that Babylon is now desolate, you say it can never be rebuilt. Well, we'll see how that pans out. But the Bible writers predicted the fall and destruction of a number of cities and indeed countries. Isaiah 17:1 and 2 predicted that Damascus would be an uninhabited heap of ruins. I'm here to tell you Damascus is still very much there. Ezekiel 26:14 to 21 predicted the downfall of Tyre. I'm here to tell you Tyre is there. Incidentally, Ezekiel also then recanted on that and almost apologized. God almost apologized and said he'd give Egypt as compensation to Nebuchadnezzar, and Nebuchadnezzar never conquered Egypt. All these predictions failed. You want to focus on the one that worked. Making of predictions, one of them's going to come true.
Thank you, Lloyd. Winston, you have 5 minutes for your summary.
Would that include the prediction that Nineveh would have been destroyed? Because it never was. There are a number of prophecies have been conditional, and that is something that you need to understand. So I'll not respond to that. Lloyd, I never told you that Rome dominated the world today. Daniel did not say that Rome would dominate the world today. I said Rome was not defeated, it was divided, just as Daniel said. And so you had the transition from Rome to Europe. You had the divisions, just as Daniel said. So I'm not talking about Rome ruling the world. And yes, you had many other empires, but the prophecy was looking on the time from Daniel to the time of the end, as it relates particularly to God's people. When Jesus came, the Jews were under subjection to Rome. They were never defeated. But as Daniel said, now, if you believe in time travel, what can I say? I see time travel as what? You believe that time travel could explain all of this. If you believe
not what I said.
I thought I heard you saying that time travel.
That's not what I said.
Would have been a better explanation. I'm not sure. Okay, well, put that aside. Well,
I said you can't prove that it wasn't time travel.
And I'm not going to spend a minute trying to prove that anyhow. But time travel could not. There is nothing that you can name me, Lloyd, that could so accurately present the future to the world. What we call today's news was Daniel's forecast. Daniel could not predict the future. It was revealed to Daniel by the God who sees the future. Daniel what do you call it? Someone who tells the future? No, he's not that. It is God. And that's the beauty about it. No man can. Daniel couldn't. I could not. It was only God himself who is able to so accurately predict it. And let's make the point again. We're not just talking about Daniel was not setting out to show all the empires that would have existed in Earth's history. But what would have happened from the time of Daniel until the time of the end We are now living in that period of the feet of iron and clay. And just as Daniel prophesied, that rock is coming. As I indicated to you yesterday in our conversation, Lloyd, when we were trying to determine how we're going to do this, I was making the point that it's going to be difficult for me to summarize all of this in such a short time, but I would not have given up the opportunity to try to make a summary of it. So as I said, I will upload a video at the channel that gives further details that could not be covered in this short environment. I yield.
Okay, thank you. Lloyd, you have 5 minutes for you, son.
I guess I don't know what I was expecting. Again, I'm always I like to be surprised. It would have been interesting to find out that the world has, looking over it, a supreme being who predicts history and smuggled in predictions into the Bible in the form of cryptic clues that can be proven to be foregleams of the future. But in the time that I've given Winston on the channel and in the time he's been given in this debate, I'm sorry, we've just not heard it. So rather than carrying on this, I mean, all I will say is you seem to be saying, Winston, oh, it's not about whether the empire was ruling or not. It's about whether it was divided or not. Well, no, the stone is cut from the mountain, and the stone comes and defeats all other kingdoms. So surely the kingdom has to be ruling at that point when there's this collision between God's kingdom and the immense image. But what you're saying is, no, those kingdoms can stop ruling, but still the statue still stands. It's all about whether they're divided. I'll leave the viewers to decide whether that's a compelling line of argument. I will just drag you back. You mentioned Nineveh as being a conditional prophecy. I didn't include Nineveh in my list of countries. Nineveh is not the same as Damascus. Isaiah predicted that Damascus would be an uninhabited heap of ruins. It didn't happen. Ezekiel predicted that Tyre would be left a shining bare rock. And then a few chapters later, God changes his mind and says, oh, sorry, it didn't quite work out that way, Nebuchadnezzar. But don't worry, I'm going to give you as compensation Egypt. Didn't happen. Nebuchadnezzar never ruled over Egypt. Zechariah and Zephaniah predicted the downfall of Gaza and Ashkelon. Didn't happen. Ezekiel 29, 1 to 21, Jeremiah 43, 9 to 13, and 46 to 13 to 25 predicted the downfall of Egypt. Didn't happen. So again, if you're going to make enough predictions, if you're going to denounce enough cities and nations and throw around these denunciations, sooner or later one of them's going to come true if you give it a few thousand years.
Okay.
Congratulations, it happened with Babylon. But you then have to explain, you can't just cherry pick the time when it just so happens to fall in line with your expectations. There's a name for that. It's called confirmation bias. You will have to, if you're being intellectually honest, go back and explain all of these failed prophecies that never come true. And just to drag you back to the point, which I'm not sure you fully understood, even if I concede that the Bible has accurately and reliably predicted the future, and I've just given you a whole bunch of examples in which it didn't accurately and reliably predict the future, all we're doing is saying the Bible has accurately predicted the future. That doesn't get us to, therefore, God, because I can't prove and you can't prove God. You certainly haven't done it in this live stream, but you also can't prove that it wasn't Marty McFly in the DeLorean. You just can't prove it. It's unprovable. But that could also be an explanation. I'm not saying that's how it happened. I'm saying that even if you could prove, which you haven't done, that Bible prophecy has predicted the future, you haven't managed to establish that only by means of God could a future prediction be made. Because I've given you an example of, even though time travel is as far as we know, physically impossible. You know, there's relativity, there's space-time, there's wormholes. Goodness knows what could happen. We know so little about the universe. But I think the most realistic explanation that seems to cover all of this perfectly is that the Bible is a man-made book, and whenever there have been predictions made, which have often been just writing after the fact, disguising it as a prediction, whenever there have been these predictions made, inevitably some have come true and some have not come true, which is exactly what you would expect if the whole thing is the product of man. And I guess on that I rest my case.
Okay.
Wonderful. Thank you, Lloyd. So now we will move on to the questions and comments from the live chat. How do you plan to do that, Lloyd? Are you going to show them on screen, or
yeah? Okay, so I just don't want to pick or be accused of picking arguments purely that support my position. Let me see if I can find. Winston, are you monitoring the live chat? Are there any comments that you would like to draw our attention to?
No, I wasn't. I'm just looking on the three of us.
There we go.
All right.
Kirk Johnson says, yes, we still love Winston and Lloyd. There's love, Winston. We've managed. My objective from the beginning was to get to the end of this and for us all to be on good terms, for there to be love. Love is all you need. Vincent is complimenting you on your jacket, Winston. It is a good jacket, to be fair. Can we just put Winston? Yeah, that's an impressive jacket. KO says, I believe in God, but I'm still siding with Lloyd's argument here in the debate. Winston needs stronger arguments. I'm going to try and find... there we go. We still love Winston. Again, feel free, Winston, if there's a comment that you'd like me to put on the screen. Lana says, those who believe God exists will continue to believe. Those who do not will continue to believe no God exists. Do you think that's fair, Winston? Do you think to some degree it's difficult to persuade people either way on this?
Lloyd, I sat down and I watched something that I thought was absolutely amazing last week. When I looked on the impeachment trial of Donald Trump, where Republicans looked at the evidence, made the determination that Trump is guilty of provoking the insurrection, but declared him not guilty of inciting it. I said that to say people will look at the evidence and call their own verdict, and you cannot predetermine for people what they will do. The evidence is convincing enough for me. There is the point that I am making because you mentioned something I missed, and I think the point that is being missed here is that there is no one who can possibly look into the future so accurately. Science can't do it. Magic cannot do it. Time travel cannot do it. The only logical explanation from my perspective is that there is indeed a God who sees the future, as the Bible says.
I will just show a comment that seems to be minded in your direction, Winston. Lloyd, can you really look at the beauty and say that happened from a big random cosmic accident and evolution from the lower life of animals, purposeful design in every way? I think that when you understand evolution by natural selection, you can grasp, and I'm not sure with respect to Winston or anyone else, I'm not sure that all theists who criticize evolution fully understand how it works. But when you understand how it works, you can understand how there can be the illusion of design in a natural process. The issue is, which I think often gets conflated, is abiogenesis. That's still fuzzy. It's interesting that we currently have the rover landed on Mars, don't we? And NASA seems fairly convinced that they will find evidence that life can arise elsewhere in space. And it seems almost intuitive to suggest that I mean, it would be bizarre, wouldn't it, if out of the vastness of the universe, the only place where you can have life is our planet, and scientists have made huge leaps in explaining how you can go from complex molecules and proteins to the early forms of life. We haven't proven it yet. That's important to say, but that I suppose my issue is that on the other side, so you have kind of science and natural selection and abiogenesis on one side, and on the other side you have the Garden of Eden. You have, boom, there's a giraffe. Boom, there's an elephant. Boom, there's Adam and Eve. I struggle with that. I really, really do, especially when, the evidence for human evolution, it's, you can go to any museum and see it. There's a Neanderthal museum here in Croatia, and it shows you the Neanderthal skeleton next to the human skeleton, and there are clear differences. There were lots of failures on the evolutionary road, and so there's some argument that Neanderthals crossbred with humans, so they never really died out. But in any case, I just see evolution as being far more complicated than just saying, oh, it's random, or we evolved from monkeys, or, oh, camera, you can't evolve a camera, which I think is what Winston said at the beginning.
Lloyd, I'd like to, if you can, show the question from Italian Apologetics.
Sure. I'm scrolling to the bottom, and I'm going to work back up. Italian Apologetics. And thank you, by the way, to Jenna Fralick for your super chat, Jenna. That's very much appreciated. Sorry, it just does take... there we are. Italian Apologetics. I think, Lloyd, you missed Winston's point about the feet of the statue. The feet are made of clay and iron, and Daniel says they won't mix together. Europe, since the fall of Rome, has been divided. Well, the Daniel chapter 2 doesn't say that it will be Europe. It doesn't say Rome. It doesn't say anything really other than... Well, let's read it, shall we? Daniel chapter 2, verse 41, the New Revised Standard Version, says, as you saw the feet and toes partly of potter's clay and partly of iron, it shall be a divided kingdom. But some of the strength of iron shall be in it, as you saw the iron mixed with the clay. As the toes of the feet were part iron and part clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly brittle. It's foretelling a divided kingdom. I don't find that a sophisticated, convincing, thorough, comprehensive explanation of human history from the Roman Empire to now. I just don't. But maybe other people do feel differently.
But Lloyd, if I may respond, that is exactly why in my correspondence with you yesterday, I was asking you to look on the video and to do a video response, because it would be virtually impossible to accurately cover all the information in a debate with 7 minutes and 5 minutes and 5 minutes rebuttal. There is so much information to be covered.
I don't doubt that there's lots of information. Clearly there's plenty of information if there were 90 minutes worth of video that you found interesting. But one thing you have to remember, Winston, is that I watch, how can I put this kindly, theist video material a lot for my job, and I find it difficult when it's the material that I need to review for my job. As a formerly religious person who finds the whole thing man-made and fake and quite often manipulative, it's extremely triggering for me to sit through material of the kind that you enjoy.
I understand.
So my point was, if you found this material compelling, surely there's a way that you can take... If I'm going to watch, let's say, a David Attenborough documentary on climate change, for example, there's going to be some points from it that are slam dunk, oh yeah, he said this, and I'm going to mention that.
Right.
So my idea was that you could at least convey the flavor of some of the slam dunk points that were made in those 90 minutes, so that it might whet my appetite or whet the audience's appetite to think, oh, clearly we've all of this time we've been missing something. There is more to this prophecy. I just didn't get it personally, but maybe the audience feels differently.
There is a question for Winston from Christina Ardeleano. It's close to the Italian apologetics comment, Lloyd, so it'll be easy to find.
I've just scrolled right to the bottom in anticipation. Okay, so it's Christiana. In the meantime, could you read it out and I'll look for it?
Yes. So the question is for Winston. What is your base that Daniel was written 2,500 years before the prophecy, when all the historians say he was contemporary?
As a matter of fact, I've actually looked into that. And I will cover that in the video that I'll be posting at the channel as well. One of the rebuttals that I saw is that Daniel was not written in the time that the Bible said it was written. They actually put it at, I think it was 166 BC. But even if Daniel were written in 166 BC, that would still be a lot of accurate information to predict 166 years before Christ. However, the Dead Sea Scrolls, that there were Dead Sea Scrolls that were found to have been written in Aramaic. Give me the word.
Aramaic.
Aramaic, right? Which is much more conversant with the language that was spoke in the time of Daniel. And it is not true that all historians say that it wasn't. No. There are those who say that Daniel, the book of Daniel, was written at the time the Bible says it was written, and there are those who said no, it came after.
Well, if I could just contradict you there, I think that it's very, very important to yield ground to scholars. I am hugely of the mind that when people devote their entire careers to studying who wrote the Bible and when, yes, there will be disagreements on certain details, but where there is consensus, that consensus should be held to, and not just dismissed because it would suit you if they were wrong. So, and that's a trick, by the way. I'm not suggesting that's what you're saying. But that's certainly what that's the position that's taken by my former religion. There's a Wikipedia page on the authorship of the Bible that spells out very clearly, based on current scholarship, when the Bible books were supposed to have been written. And it is a good observation to make that Daniel was written not as anciently as many would suggest.
Mm-hmm. But I made the point that there are scholars who agree with the Bible. There are historians who agree with the Bible.
But is it the consensus?
Well, I'm not sure what I can't answer now. I would have to look into that. But I make the point. I make the point that even if I were to concede that it was much later, as late as 166 BC, it would still be compelling evidence, because there's a lot that is predicted for our time that Daniel could not have predicted. And here's the interesting thing about it too. If it was written 166 BC, it could not have been written by Daniel. And if it was written at that time, it is still saying that Daniel saw that. So it would be speaking history then. So that the evidence still remains compelling for me, even if I were to take it that it was written just 166 years before Christ.
Sorry for not being on top of the camera, by the way.
That's all right.
So whatever Junior says, Lloyd, do you take that evolution requires belief just as religion does? That is, belief in the billions of years for gradual change from the first cell. Both are unfalsifiable beliefs. I don't know that they're unfalsifiable. When it comes to evolution by natural selection, that's something that we can see. That's something that we have evidence for. There's evidence for it in DNA. There's evidence for it in the fossil record. Speak to biologists who study bacteria and microbes, and they will tell you one of the reasons why there's antibiotics are running out is because of basically evolution. Evolution's all around us. The whole issue of abiogenesis is not proven. Is that an unfalsifiable claim? I don't think it is. I think that in the future scientists will have more of a handle on that and will be able to prove categorically. But until that day comes, we need to be honest and say, at this point, it's not slam dunk. Although I'm sure there are many scientists who would say it is. You just don't understand it well enough. But the point is, I don't consider mine to be a religious belief because it's based on the scientific method. It's based on observable science. Certainly, evolution by natural selection is observable science, and that's what I think lots of theists don't understand. There is evidence; it's just that they don't want to look at it. Mm-hmm. We've reached the 50-minute mark. Do we want to take more questions? Do you want to take more questions, Winston?
Whatever you decide, I'm quite fine.
Okay. There's actually one question here, just as I look. Winston, do you discount manipulation by men for their own selfish gains? The King James Bible has over 1,000 mistakes, so this shows that men did manipulate scriptures to their benefit. Do you want to answer that?
Yes, I'd love to. I have seen errors in the Bible. I have seen minor contradictions here and there in the scriptures, and I still believe it is the Word of God. And I'll explain why. We all agree that we are not looking on originals. We don't have them. There are copies of copies of copies of copies. It is inevitable from my perspective that there's going to be 100% perfect reproduction of the information. I believe it is unavoidable that there's going to be some errors. But what I have found is that the major information, the fundamental points, continue to be firm. And I just look on the much bigger picture. If you were to get 10 persons, 10 honest persons, and convey a message to one and ask them to pass it on to the 10th person, chances are by the time you get to the 10th person, it could be totally a different message or the message slightly altered. But I believe what God has said, that he would preserve his word in such a way that the fundamental messages of the Bible are maintained and are intact, and I believe them.
Lloyd, I think we have a question from Mark O'Donnell.
I was gonna put that on the screen. Excellent. Let me first acknowledge 2 super chats from SAS or CAS Graphics. Thank you so much for your super chat, and also Chris Sai. Thank you for your super chats. The super chats are very helpful because they help maintain the channel. Motorway to Roswell says, Winston, thanks for this debate. I'm going to subscribe to your channel. All right. I am no longer. I think he means although I am no longer a Christian. So, you've got a new subscriber there.
Thank you.
And Mark O'Donnell says, I'm interested in knowing if Winston accepts the Jehovah's Witness and biblical timeline that humans were created by God in 4026 BCE and also that the flood occurred in 2370 BCE.
I would have to look at the timeline. I wouldn't. If you were to ask me today, before this debate, when was the world created and when did the flood occur, I could not give you a timeline.
Do those dates sound approximately reasonable to you?
No. Right. No. I believe that the world, because that would make. Oh yes, roughly. I believe the world is young, approximately 6,000 years old. And interestingly, I see the shock on your face, Lloyd. There's a scientist, Doctor, I think, is it Charles Gentry, who actually proved from scientific experiments. You could look it up, that the world is actually young and not as.
I'm sure you're not saying that scientists say the Earth is young.
No, not at all. No. I'm saying that this scientist is
a scientist.
A scientist,
right?
Gentry, is contradicting his colleagues with what he calls scientific evidence for the young age of the Earth.
So you'll take one scientist over the scientific consensus if it conforms with your expectations?
No, no, I am not like that. And
No.
this is where you and I have something in common, Lloyd. I don't just grab if I were to just grab views that are convenient to mine, I would remain a Baptist today. All right, I will look at the evidence, and what Dr. Gentry has done is he's asked his colleagues to counter his arguments, and up to the time when I stopped watching, they did not come forward. So I probably would need to go back and look to see what happened. Right. So
Yeah.
I am listening to see what the response is, but I have not seen it.
Lloyd, I have a question from, I can't find it in the chat. I saw it very quickly. A question from Paul Schlechter. Question from both. How specific should a prophecy be to prove divine origin?
Well, this was the point I was trying to make, is that even if you had an incredibly specific prophecy, let's take the Babylon prophecy. There's a prophecy that on the face of it came true because the writers couldn't have known, and I covered this, by the way, in my Always Rejoice rebuttal. I went into quite some detail on to what extent it can be said that Babylon is desolate, because it's actually a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and seems to be quite a lot of activity when you look at the Google Earth. But let's, for argument's sake, say that it is a pile of rubble. How could the Bible writers who said it would be a heap of ruins, how could they have known that? Here you have one example at least of them saying something that would be the case. They couldn't have known thousands of years in advance that it would be the case thousands of years later. How do you explain that? And again, I summarized it by saying, well, there's two problems here. First of all, what about all the places? I will let you weigh in on this, Winston. What about all the places where they predicted desolation and it didn't happen? And number two, if you predict desolation for enough places and give it enough thousands of years, sooner or later one of those predictions is going to happen. If I say, you know, my house is going to be desolate one day, and throw in a few thousand years, almost certainly that's going to happen one way or the other, for whatever reason. So yeah, I don't, and you can't discount the possibility, of course, that it could be something other than God influencing this prophecy, that it could be a time traveler or an advanced alien race or the effects of some kind of simulation that we're unaware of. So go on, Winston.
Which is fine.
Yeah.
And which is what I am saying, that if you look at the evidence and you will determine that the answer is time travel, fine. If you determine that it is something else, fine. I have accepted the explanation that it is evidence for God. But I just want to make the point that I believe that you're missing, Lloyd, about Daniel chapter 2. Daniel chapter 2 is not about one prophecy that proved true. It's about a series of prophecies that proved to be true, not one, not two, but multiple prophecies that proved to be true in one prophecy, Daniel chapter 2, that comes down to our very day today. Today we are living in that part of the statue that Daniel prophesied, and not time travel. Not the things you mentioned, I believe, but only a God who sees the future could have revealed that.
Just to be absolutely clear, I'm not saying it was time travel. That wasn't my point. And
I'm not saying you're saying that. I know that.
I also invite anyone to read, anyone who's found this debate interesting, perhaps, to read Daniel chapter 2, read it thoroughly, and see what you think. I think that's it, though. Winston, I think we've achieved what we set out to achieve, which is a friendly, respectful conversation, proving that you can tackle difficult subjects where there is a huge rift of opinion in a friendly and respectful way.
Absolutely.
I think there's mutual, or I sense there is mutual respect between us. You do great work on your channel. Winston's channel is Watchtower Examination. Please do check it out. but that's all we have time for. Thank you to the
Thanks so much.
900 plus who have tuned in for this. Clearly something that people were anxious to watch. I hope it's lived up to expectations. And thank you to Renato for expertly moderating the conversation.
Thank you much.
Thank you, Lloyd. Thank you,
Okay.
Winston. It was glad to be a part of it.
Take care, gentlemen, and goodbye to you all. Don't forget to subscribe to the Lloyd Evans channel for more such videos. And as always, thank you for watching.